Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for sticking with us. I think I'm told that we have about 25 minutes of time here for conversation, so looking forward to that with Tom Miller and Tom Harkin. Senator Harkin, your investigation was the turning point for the issue on for-profit colleges' abuses, and being a former staffer, I remember a lot of the hoopla around that and a lot of the work that was being done on the committee by the investigators and committee staff. Take us back to that time. What was, describe how that investigation came to be, or was there much resistance to it?
Well, first of all, Joseph, I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank Alex Chevanow for this movie. This is the first time I ever saw it. Kind of a surprise to me. But it really does bring home all of the things that we uncovered in our two and a half, almost 3-year investigation. What propelled me to do that was I had remembered the San Nunn provisions in the early 90s when we put those 3 conditions on, and then I saw how they were peeled off later on, and then some staff members of mine, when I took over the committee after Ted Kennedy died, I'd been on the committee all those years, but I wasn't chair. So I chaired it, then staff came to me and said, you know, there's a lot of problems in the for-profit industry. And about the same time, a little bit before that, oh gosh, I have to remember when this was, sometime, Tom, maybe you can help me here. There was this school in Clinton run by the nuns.
Franciscan.
What was it called?
It became Ashford.
It became Ashford, but before that.
It wasn't Mary Crest, I think Mary Crest.
And I remember I'd gotten them some money through appropriations for the nursing school, and they built a little addition, they built a new addition there, but then it.
Not an earmark, though.
Huh?
Not an earmark.
It was at one point. That's why we had earmarked. But then it went under, and I remember that they were trying to solve, I remember one day, a sister, I forget her name, came into the office with somebody else, wanted to see me, and she was just aglow. They had found a purchaser for the school, and I'd never heard of them before, Corinthian, and they were going to build this school up. I said, fine, I didn't know anything about it. Well, a few years went by, and all of a sudden, I see this school that used to have 200 or 300 students, all of a sudden it's got a couple thousand. And more, and so you got to start asking questions. What are they doing? Well, about that same time, I had more input coming into me from staff and others that this was a huge problem. So we did some preliminary work on it, and I finally decided that this was worthy of a full-fledged investigation by the committee. So we started the investigation, and you saw one scene in there. When we started the hearing, Mike Enzi from Wyoming was my ranking member. And as we started, he said his things, he said something about it, and then he and 2 or 3 other Republicans were there, got him locked out. And through the entire investigation, which I consider to be nonpartisan, we were just trying to get the data and what was going on. We worked with the Justice Department, we worked with the Department of Education on this, but after that, not one member of the other side would even come to a hearing during all those investigations. So we had to do it that way, and it was kind of sad. But we got the job done. Most of the things that people were talking about there came out of that. You can get the committee report that we filed on it. And the Obama administration then started changing some of the regulations, which were good, but they were regulations, not law. So that means the new administration can now roll back those regulations, and that's what they're doing.
Was there anything particularly interesting to you or surprising to you as you went through the investigation? Anything that stood out?
Well, I never realized how much money these people were making. I mean, the people that ran these private schools and and how much Wall Street had an influence in this. You know, we listened in, our staff, we actually listened in on some of the investor calls. You can do that, you know, you can listen in on investor calls. And to hear them, we sat through one whole investor call, and all they talked about was how many they had enrolled, what they were looking at for the next semester or next half year, and what the returns were, and how much profit they were making. Not one person said, and here's what we're doing, here's the students, here's the kind of jobs they're getting. Not one word about how the students were doing, just how much money they were making. That just surprised, I couldn't believe how much money. I mean, $20–30 million a year. And this is all taxpayers' dollars. As I said in the movie, they're free. They got all this money, they got big homes in Florida, they got yachts. I mean, they took all your money and the students have the debt. It's just, it is so gross. Even today, I can't believe this has happened to us. And now, we did a whole investigation. Attorney General Miller went after Ashford. In fact, we wrote a letter to all the attorney generals in the United States from our committee, telling them about this and asking them to do stuff on the state level to go after it. Well, we had two that did. Tom Miller and Jack Conway were about the only two that went after it. And Tom went after Ashford, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm right at this. I think Tom Miller got the first settlement of any attorney generals in the United States on closing down these for-profit schools. I don't remember the amount of money, but it was a lot. Maybe you remember how much it was, I don't know, but it was a lot of money that he. So my hat's off to Tom Miller for closing down Ashford University here.
Attorney General, what was the climate back then, and how were other states' attorneys general looking at this sort of activity? Was it a crisis to them? Was it something that was even on their radar? How did you work with others?
Yeah, I think for a number of attorney generals, it was a crisis and was on our radar. For instance, Lisa Madigan, my great colleague in Illinois for so long, she did shut down Westwood, which I sued them and shut them down. But, you know, we should all recognize, particularly in this room and in Iowa, how, you know, we got to understand and realize this. It was because of Tom. His hearings were just enormous and had an enormous effect and documented in very good detail exactly what was going on. And Tom, you deserve a lot of credit for the good things that happened as a result of this and the reform, because you really highlighted this for us, the state attorney generals, for the press, for other members of Congress, for some of the nonprofits that are interested in this. Yours was, you know, congressional hearings usually don't have much of an effect. I may be wrong on that. This was exactly the opposite. This had an enormous effect on all of us, and that's how we really realized how important this was and got involved. What we did is fairly early on, after learning so much from Tom, we looked at the 10 largest nonprofit schools in terms of students and revenue in 2010. 2010 was probably the high point of income and revenue and fraud. And what had happened, Tom spoke so well about the second Bush administration weakening the three checks, the three reforms, and that had a big effect. But what even was a bigger effect was the intangible. By changing them, by undercutting them, they took it as a signal of anything goes. And that's where it really exploded in 7, 8, 9, and 10. We looked at 10 and see who was the largest and to see if they were involved in the fraud. And fairly quickly we learned that the 9th and 10th were quite a bit smaller than the previous 8. So we looked at 8. Here's what happened over a period of years. 2 of them went out of business, completely out of business, Corinthian and ITT. The Obama administration deserves a lot of credit for that. They took actions in terms of their funding that effectively put them out of business. And, you know, I don't think there was any administration, any previous administration, including Clinton or Carter and the Republicans, that would have taken that bold of action. So I give them just a huge amount of credit. A third one, EDMC, we've investigated, we've had a monitor. They've been acquired by Dream Center, and that is sort of, it looks like they're basically gonna go out of business. So that's the third. Bridgepoint Ashford, you know, we investigated, we had a monitor. They are still in business, but their student body is less than half of what it was at the peak. Career is also continues to be in business. We've had a settlement with them. We have a monitor with them. They reorganized considerably and are much smaller, at least half of what they were. DeVry has also spun off a lot of their students, but do continue in business. Also less than half of what they were. And then the final two were Phoenix, which was the largest by far. It was sold a couple of years ago and has new ownership, which we have at least some more confidence in than the previous ownership. And they're probably at a third or less than where they were at the peak. And then Kaplan was acquired by Purdue University. And we see that as a positive in the sense that these for-profits, you know, didn't have didn't have reputational interests to worry about. Obviously Purdue does. Purdue has a lot in state, so they have a reputational interest to worry about. And you think that that's going to be a real restraint on them. On the other hand, I think they've subcontracted to Kaplan a lot of the administration. So of the 8, 2 are out of business. A third is about to go out of business. The other 5 are less than half of 4. So the overall student body of the 8 is probably a third of what it was, maybe a little less, between a quarter to a third of what it was. And overall, they mentioned $32 billion at one point. The most recent statistics I saw were at 16 or 17 billion dollars. So the overall industry is about half of what it was. So there has been some reform, there has been some change. There's obviously some abuse that goes on that everybody needs to tend to. But it's largely because of Tom, you know, getting everybody aware. It's unlikely that they're going to be able to make the kind of revival with the encouragement from this administration that they made with the encouragement from the Bush administration.
There is, however, one new development. Well, I tell you, a snake has a lot of heads, a lot of lives. There's a university called Grand Canyon University. It was for profit. Now, there then became established Grand Canyon Education. Grand Canyon Education is now the for-profit. Grand Canyon University is a not-for-profit. Grand Canyon University, the not-for-profit, which is like Drake University, private nonprofit, has a contract with Grand Canyon Education, which is the for-profit. Grand Canyon Education now is doing the same things you saw here. They're recruiting, they're doing all that stuff for...
And then they're avoiding the 90-10.
And they don't have to be the 90-10 because Grand Canyon University is a not-for-profit. So it doesn't. They can avoid the 90-10 rule. So they're converting. So some, boy, criminal mind, the ingenuity of it is fantastic. So they figured out how to start doing these conversions. So that's the new thing that we're going to have to address. Is how you go after those new structures now. I don't know the answer to that right now. It's starting to happen. I only know of that one, or maybe.
Yeah, and there are a number of other attempts, that's a common gambit among some of them.
That must have just started in the last year or two. or something.
It probably last 2 years.
Last
Yeah.
year. State,
And I think Grand Canyon has gotten a lot farther than anybody else. You're right
Yeah.
about that.
so stay tuned.
And that's where the difference in administration makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
I don't think the Obama administration would allow that gambit.
No, they're just gaming it, to say that, so they say they're separate, right? So Grand Canyon Education is different than Grand Canyon University. They just have a contractual relationship. The CEO of Grand Canyon Education is the same CEO of Grand Canyon University.
I want to remind you all that you can text your questions to the number above, or if you have cards, you can look those cards up and Lindy will come and take those. Talk to us a little bit about the tools that are available to an attorney general to kind of seek out some of these things, and how do you identify some of the bad actors?
Yeah, I mean, we try and, create the right priorities by getting companies that are bad actors in that are large, and, as a result, create the most harm. When we did it with the top 10, and afterwards, the top 8, that was really a good way to do it, because they were all involved. We're trying to figure out now who are the new actors, and we're aware of Grand Canyon and concerned about them. We also, after doing some of the large ones, started to get into the regional ones, and some of them are particularly bad. But a number of them have gone out of business. Valderat was a local one that we were about to sue, and they went out of business just before we started to take action there. So, our big focus, our big authority is on deception. All of this is extraordinary deception. And we try and use our full force to deal with that. And I think we have made an impact, somewhere along the lines that I mentioned before. But continue to look for other companies that would violate it. The thing that we have less control over is the bad education. That's not a deception mode. We try and turn it into a deception in terms of what they say and representations, and sometimes can do that. But the really sad thing there is the gainful employment rule was really structured, and they did it twice, and I think they had it refined, the Obama administration, so that the gainful employment rule would have taken care of a lot of the bad schools that really were programs that really never were going to work for students, or programs that were taught badly. We were starting to see before the election some of the schools discarding some of the bad programs, which is exactly what we wanted. And ultimately, I think some of the schools would have had to go out of business that were not producing had the rule been withdrawn. But that was a huge loss, and one for us, and it was important because it's hard for us to reach that set of issues.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think what are the responsibilities regarding access and affordability? Does a tuition-driven nonprofit, non-elite private school like Drake have for the public good?
Say that again?
The question is, what kind of responsibilities regarding access and affordability does a tuition-driven nonprofit, non-elite private school like Drake have for the public good? So what are our responsibilities as a university? How can we help?
Well, I don't know, I think, like any university, is to make sure they have a diverse student population, to make sure that they reach out to low-income students who can get, who have Pell Grant availabilities, and hopefully that Drake and other private nonprofit schools will continue to push for increases in Pell Grants for low-income students. Again, in any way they can to keep tuition low. But I know the expenses that are out there. But now I'm venturing into territory that I don't know a lot about. But I will say this, I think schools like Drake and others, I think of great private schools we have in Iowa, Graceland, Simpson, Drake, Vista.
Loris, don't forget.
Oh, Loris College. Great schools. There need to be, and I've thought about this a lot, more integration or association with our community colleges in Iowa. I don't know exactly what form that would take, but I think that these private schools could do a lot with community colleges and other entities like it. Now, what's going on in my head is, I got money for a new community health center in Cumberland. Well, they formed an alliance just right across the road from the community college there. So that community college teaches healthcare students in health and health management, and they come just across the street over to the community health center and provide a workforce plus learning at the same time. Is there some kind of an arrangement between our private schools in Iowa, and I know a lot of them are hurting also, to work with our community colleges to form some kind of a seamless transition? There are a lot of kids who go to community colleges to learn a trade, learn to do something, fine, that's it. Some of them go there because they're later students. They see that as their stepping off. They go there, then they want to go to college. They want to go and get a degree, a bachelor's degree. I don't know what Simpson and Drake and all these Loris are doing with that, but some kind of an interrelationship, it seems to me, would benefit everyone.
Provost says yes.
Yeah, we just did that this past year.
What?
Our faculty senate approved a seamless transition from community colleges to Drake this past year.
I didn't know that.
Did
Are
Yeah,
other
but
colleges?
you were a great setup, man.
Are other private schools doing that in Iowa?
I don't know.
And Joseph, I didn't know Drake was not an elite school.
I did not write that question. Just repeating. General Miller, is there a way for folks who want to help the students who are seeking to get discharges from some of their loans and other things? Is there any sort of network or a way to volunteer and help out?
Yeah, I think one of the premier organizations is well represented here. Aaron, why don't you just tell them, about your organization and what you're doing, and folks can jump in and help.
Thanks. We started the National Student Legal Defense Network, called Student Defense, about a year and a half ago.
And Aaron was one of the people that was in the Obama administration and doing a lot of these really important and creative activities.
And I mean, first, I want to thank Senator Harkin and General Miller because, I came out of Kentucky AG's office and had worked for Jack Conway, who he mentioned, and partnered with him. But when I came to the U.S. Department of Education, it wasn't until General Miller flew to Washington, D.C., convened all of the federal agencies into a room with several of the key state AGs and said, these are the 4 worst national predatory for-profit college chains. We need to investigate them all together. And if that hadn't happened, if General Miller hadn't flown and convened everyone, those companies, I think, would still be in business today. There would be hundreds of thousands of students still attending those schools and billions of dollars a year going to them. So it's really both these heroes of mine that are responsible for this company being shut down.
Well,
and
Aaron,
really saving the students. We formed this group really to continue the work, to continue their legacy and provide. We saw that there wasn't a legal services entity to one, represent students and actions for debt relief, students like Jennifer and the ones that you saw in the film, and also to combat the Trump administration and Secretary DeVos when they were rolling back all of these protections like the gainful employment regulations. So that's really the two focuses, along with supporting the state policy work that you heard about, that are our mission, combating these regulatory rollbacks of the Trump administration and then representing students in cases against these predatory companies. So our website's defendstudents.org, and if you have stories or if you know people that need representation, feel free to contact us.
And you're being supported by the Kresge Foundation.
Yes, and Kresge Foundation, who's here today, and sponsoring this great event. Thanks to them too.
Thanks. So we have time for one more question, and it is really
I was doing so really valuable.
Oh, is that from Senator Fernbach?
Tell us a little bit about what you would want to do, either if you were still chair of the committee in this current atmosphere, or what advice you would give to the members of the whole committee, and General Miller, your fellow AGs, when it comes to this concern and these issues.
Well, wait a minute, I mean, look, with this administration, there's not much you can do. I mean, even if I were still chair of the committee, which I wouldn't be, I would be the ranking member now if I'd stayed in the Senate. But it would be impossible. I mean, you can't even have hearings. It's up to the chairman, and they wouldn't do that. I think what we need is, we really need, and I say this in a nonpartisan fashion as much as I can, and I think I saw the stuff that Student Defense put out, listing all of the candidates' positions, including President Trump and Bill Weld and others who are running. You put that out, right? I think. Who put that out?
Us or one of our partner organizations.
Somebody put that whole thing out.
They're nonpartisan, I think, Tom.
Huh?
They're a nonpartisan group. but
Well, that's what I mean.
One of their,
Some nonpartisan group put this whole thing out, of not only the Democrats running for president, but the Republicans who are running. And my point being this, that we really need to have these presidential candidates talking more about not just relieving student debt, as important as that is, but what's the structure going forward? Some are saying free college for all. Some are saying maybe not all of that, but the first couple of years. There's a lot of different things out there. I think through all of this, we need to have some real thought about how we go forward in paying for students. I always use myself as an example. I come from a very poor family, went to high school, went to Iowa State, and in 1958, when I entered college, there began a student loan program. It was called the National Defense Student Loan Program, or the Eisenhower Program. And I could go to a window at Iowa State in Berkshire Hall and borrow money. And I did. And here's the thing though, I borrowed the money from Iowa State. The money went to Iowa State, so I borrowed it from the college, a direct loan. All the time I was in college, the interest clock did not tick. I then went 5 years in the military. So 5 years in the military, no interest charges. I then went to 3 years of law school under the GI Bill. So I want to thank all you taxpayers for my education. And during 3 years of law school, no interest payments. Then I got a 1 year, after you graduate from law school, you get 1 year then grace period. So here, it's 1973 before I ever started having to pay anything back. And no interest charges.
well, you were almost in Congress then, Tom.
Well, I had actually,
1 year away, weren't you?
well, I had actually run once and lost. and the next year I started having to pay back on the student loan. And the interest rate was about 1.5%. At that time, it was cost of money to the government. And I thought, if that was good enough for me, why isn't it good enough for students today? Well, imagine my surprise when I found out, and I hadn't paid much attention to it. I was in law school and came back here to Iowa, worked at Legal Aid in Des Moines, and found out that this program had morphed under the Nixon administration into the Guaranteed Student Loan Program. That you now go to a bank, and the banks and stuff loan you the money, and the government guarantees it. I thought, well, that's kind of crazy. Why would you do that? Well, because the banks saw a way of making a lot of money on the student guarantees. I mean, what's not to like about loaning someone money and the federal government guarantees it in case you don't pay it back? They can make all kinds of money on that. Then that morphed again into a different form of both subsidized and unsubsidized type loans. That was called the FEL program at that time, or the Stafford loans. The NDSL became the Perkins loan program, and it no longer exists. It doesn't even exist. So my way of thinking is, and the one good thing I liked about it was that when you paid your money back, you paid it back to the school. And we all have allegiances to our schools, right? But if you get a notice from the ABC credit agency in Seattle, Washington, that you owe $50,000, and would you please pay so much a month? Who's ABC? Who's Seattle? I don't live there. The heck with them. But if you get it from Drake or Iowa State or the University of Iowa, well, that's my school. You don't want to cheat your school out of that. But ABC out in Seattle, who are they? And then they sell it to somebody else. So I always thought that having loans direct from a university to a student at cost of money to the government plus maybe 1%, I still think that's a good idea. Rather than turning it over to private lenders who make money on it, you could provide a lot more money cheaper to students in the future than we do right now. That, increasing Pell Grants, are still the gold standard as far as I'm concerned in terms of low-income students accessing higher education. But I think it said, they're about 25% now of cost. Back when I first went to Congress, it was like 60 or 70% of the cost of going to college. Now it's 25%, maybe even less than that now. So those two things, and then some relief on debts for students. I just, look, I was there during the TARP bailout of the banks in 2008, 2009. How many hundreds of billions of dollars did we bail them out? Well, and people say, well, it saved our economic system. We had a spurt of economic activity after that in the Obama administration, still going on today, because we were able to bail them out. I've advocated, yes, I probably shouldn't be saying these things now, but look, ask me, I think it would be legitimate for the federal government to buy up all the student debt in the country. It's about $1.2 trillion. See, that's a lot of money. Where are you gonna get that money? The same place they got the money for the TARP bailout. The same place they got the money for the millionaire's tax credit that they passed a couple of years ago, that they put on the national debt. I think by buying up all that debt and relieving students of that responsibility, there would be a spurt of another spurt of economic activity, more than any tax break would ever give you. Because now, these are not students, these are people who were students. They now are raising a family, they're starting their jobs. All of a sudden, they don't have to pay back $90,000 or $300,000 or $500,000. Wow, now they can buy a house. Now maybe they can afford to put some money away for their kids' education. And they can start putting money in savings accounts for their kids' education in the future. I just think the economic balance on that would be tremendous for our country and relieve a lot of the anxiety young people who are in their late 20s, 30s, 40s, probably some in their 50s now, that are still burdened by this tremendous debt. I know people say, well, that you just, that might be unfair. It would be unfair to the present students. Well, but you couple both. You buy up the debt, you relieve them of that burden, and then you institute better Pell Grants, better direct loans at cost of money to the government plus 1%, with all of the kind of things I had. All the time you're in school, no interest. If you do community service, national public service, Peace Corps, whatever it might be, no interest. And then later on, you start to pay it, and then that's when the interest clock starts to run. And not at 10% or 12% or 6%, but like whatever cost of money is to the government plus 1 or 2%. So what would it be? Today it's 1.75%, so maybe 3% money, something like that. Anyway, enough of that.
On my question in terms of what I would say to my colleagues is, persistence and vigilance, to keep our eye on and keep actions and do things around the enforcement of deception rules and laws with the for-profits. There's just so many things that we AGs can and should do. And when we finish something or get close to finishing, we move on to the next thing. And that's understandable, particularly in this world. Our major priority now is opioids, which is just an enormous curse for this country. We are making some progress in settlement negotiations there. But we can't forget about the for-profit colleges, and particularly now because they know they have a lot of friends in Washington, and that can do nothing but encourage.
Yeah, we've got a vigilance. I think everybody running for Congress or House or Senate ought to be asked questions. What are you going to do? What's your position on these for-profit colleges? What are you going to do if you get elected or re-elected? What are you going to do to rein them in and make them more responsible purveyors of education in this country? I've said many times, I never envisioned putting everything out of business. That there are some for-profit schools, believe it or not, that have done a good job. And we found them in our investigation stuff. Some are doing reasonably well. They're not paying exorbitant things. They're not on Wall Street. They're not owned by debt or equity firms. They started out small. A lot of them are technical. They aren't doing a lot of broad-based, but they're sort of focused in one area or another. And some of them do reasonably good work. But I found them to be smaller, sometimes family-run. Sometimes they've been in the family for a long time. And more often than not, they're geared towards one or two things, like diesel mechanic or electricians or things like that.
Well, I think that's a good note on which to end, so thank you both.